Nick, I've decided something.
What's that, Mike?
I don't want any more friends. So from now on, we're only playing games that can only accommodate 2 people. And we're the 2.
Luckily, we don't have any friends, so it works.
It's helpful. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike.
I'm Nick.
We are the Brothers Murph, and it's time to, talk about 2-player-only games.
Indeed. So these are games you can
Not because
only
we don't want
play...
friends, because, again, we don't have them.
Yeah, indeed. You only play these at 2 players. We actually did a list recently where we talked about our games that we like best at 2 players, but they're not exclusively 2-player games.
Right here.
Follow that card to watch that video. But this is going to be 2-player-only games, or I guess some of these you could solo as well.
Yeah, solo's kind of a thing. So either solo or 2-player
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a
games.
lot of 2-player-only games out there, and a lot of them are quite good.
Yeah, I always think it's like a really interesting design challenge and stuff, and it makes me interested in the games. So we're going to talk about 10 here. If you want 10 more games, because we had a lot of games that we wanted to talk about here, we have another separate list that's on our Patreon right now. So consider supporting our channel. It really helps us out a lot, and you get extra content like that and vlogs and Q&A and stuff like that on our Patreon. And so check that out. In the meantime, let's get to number 10.
Michael, let's make the people mad already.
Let's do it.
Clask.
Clask. It's on here.
Because it's incredible.
I'm sorry, Twilight Struggle, but it's Clask.
It's Clask.
It has to be Clask.
Clask is kind of like, it's a tabletop game. It's not a board game.
No, it's not, but it's a very fun activity to do. It's a game that is for a 2-player. It kind of simulates an air hockey-ish game where there's this little ball. It's way better.
There's multiple ways to score.
Oh, there's multiple ways to score. You're using these magnetized, these little, you're a little person running around. You're just bonking into a ball and trying to get into this other goal, which is just a circular kind of hole in the board. And there's multiple ways to score, because obviously if you get it in the hole, then you score a goal.
Boom.
But there's also these little magnetic marshmallow pieces that are going around and stuff, and if you get 2 of them attached to your magnetic player piece, you lose, and the other team scores, the other player rather scores a point, and so on. You can also fall into your own goal, which is bad form, and that will award the other player a point. We love this game because it's perfect for like an end of game night use, or you just want something completely silly. Yeah. You can get competitive with it. There is that dexterity element. It's not a board game per se, but I don't care because it's ridiculously fun to play.
It has no right being as fun as it is, but there's like a whole tournament scene. There's like it's like a whole thing. But I honestly, talking real, the reason why I like Clask so much is because of the fact there's essentially 3 ways to score points. Again, you can score in the goal, which makes sense. You can hit 2 of those marshmallow things onto your opponent, and so sometimes you're like, I'm just trying to smack these things over on Mike's side, so he's trying to avoid
lots of
them.
strategies to employ.
And then also, if you ever go into your own goal, with your person, it's called a Clask, that scores the other person a point. So there's a lot of things to actually like think about.
Yeah, it's not just
like
mindless,
strategic
like
necessarily, but it's not like mindless whacking. Like
you could also lose control of if you deconnect, because your hand's underneath the
so
board.
There's 4 ways.
Your magnet disconnects, you can't recover. So you have to be strategic.
Yeah,
it's
basically it's a tactic strategy. Again, get wrecked, Twilight Struggle. It's not on this list.
It's not on this list.
Because we just don't like. But Clask is, because it's better.
Yeah. Number 9 is a game about cats.
It is a game about cats.
Cats going boop and
it's
bouncing things. That's called boop. It's an abstract game. This is sort of standing in for a lot of. There's a ton of abstract 2-player games. And so boop is one where you are cats on a bed.
Yeah.
And you're placing down a cat, or kittens mostly, to start the game. And you place a kitten down, there's other kittens adjacent to that kitten in all 8 of the surrounding squares. They will boop 1 space.
They're like jumping in the middle.
And it kind of makes the other cats bop away. So you are trying to ultimately get 3 kittens in a row. Because if you get 3 of your kittens/cats in a row, you can take all those pieces off the board and they all become cats. Yep. Cats will not get booped by kittens. They're not afraid of no kitten. They will boop other cats. If you get 3 of your cats in a row,
you win.
Then you win the game. So it's really fun to try to strategically boop stuff and boop your own player pieces into a position to make those lines happen. It's really thinky and hard.
It's one of those, like, kind of like a Santorini kind of strategy game where there's like no rules. As a lot of these really great abstract strategy games are, there's like 1 or 2 rules. It's like
very simple.
You put a cat or a kitten out, they're gonna boop whoever they can boop. You're trying to get them in line. That's the entire game.
Yeah.
But it's that tough abstract strategy where you're trying to position everything in the right spot to boop this. You're trying to have the other person boop your cats in a line if you can, and then trying to swap things out for bigger cats so that you're not getting booped by kittens anymore. And then you're trying to, it's like this like little war battle you're doing, but you're doing it with cats, and it's great. And it also goes to show like how much theme matters. Because this game, if it was just discs, like I'm the red discs, Mike's like the black discs, like checkers or something like that, And it was just like you boom and you move the things out. This game wouldn't have sold at all. It wouldn't have sold at all.
Yeah.
It would have still been a
It's
good
like, it'd
game.
be a fine game.
So it would have been a fine game, but it wouldn't have sold at
Agreed.
all. This is why theme matters, because they decided to make this theme. They made this really cool, like, cushiony thing, so it's like a bed.
Oh, it's great.
Gave great little cat meeples.
You play on the box,
and it's been
which
selling like
completes
crazy.
the bed. Yeah.
It's why theme matters. If you're not going to have a theme on your game's themeless, like this is, put a cool theme on it, and people will buy it. Case in point is Boop, but the abstract strategy part of it is really, really solid and does exactly what abstract strategy does. That's great. Super, super simple rules, but really heavy tactical strategy going on. It's just great.
And then they're going to do a Halloween version, which I'm going to buy so fast. And if it's not
called
called
Boo,
it better be. If it's not, then I'm protesting because, like, duh,
I'm
that's
like,
easy.
give me all the holiday versions. Of this
Yes,
game. I want them
little
all.
cats and Christmas hats. Come on, forget about it. That's Boop, everybody. Number 9. Let's get to number 8.
Number 8's been a staple for us in terms of a two-player game that we love, and this is Baseball Highlights 2045.
Oh, yeah.
I still love this game. This is a game where you are simulating a baseball game, but a baseball game in 2045. And in this world, it's got one of the coolest, like, themes to it.
Yeah.
Because in this world, baseball has kind of fallen out of favor, and so to bring it back, they started bringing in, like, cyborgs and robots.
Yeah.
So pitchers have, like, bionic arms, and they can pitch, like, crazy fast. So then they brought in robots, because robots can, like, again, see things and, like, track it and knock it out of the park, no problem. And then there's also naturals, which are people without any robotic parts to them. And they're kind of like the hometown heroes because they're like people really rally behind the naturals because they're just people. And it's this really cool game where you're simulating a baseball game where it's a deck building game and you are playing out a card, and that card is going to simulate one inning of play, basically. And you are going to be threatening some kind of offense during that inning, and then you're also going to be dealing with the offense that your opponent essentially threatened to use. So if Mike puts out a card that says, I'm going to do a single, I'm going to play out a card that says, I'm going to stop that single, and then I'm going to threaten 2 doubles. Because again, we're playing over an entire inning with one card, so 2 doubles makes sense.
Right.
And so you're doing that, and you're going these back and forth and trying to stop your opponent from scoring runs and trying to threaten your own stuff. And there's so many mind games that go on in this game.
Yeah, you're really trying to, like, fish out. You're trying to, like, you know, when I play, I'm holding on to some really good offensive cards. So I'm trying to, like, put these little ones out there that threaten enough to make you play your best defensive cards to hopefully then leave you depleted, and then I rally late in the game.
It's really
and vice
fun.
versa. And you know, kind of, you see what everyone's recruiting from game to game, what they're buying. So you're aware generally of what kind of stuff they have and trying to then counter and adjust, like a baseball game, trying to make adjustments.
Because after every game, you get to get someone on the open market. There's free agents out there, and then you'll get to recruit them. And the cool thing is when you recruit them, one, they go right on top of your deck, which means you're going to have them next game.
And I know that now.
And Mike knows that, so he's like, oh man, Nick just got that triple home run card. When's that going to come out? And then the cool thing is then you're going to take one of your cards from your deck and you're going to send them down to the minor league, which means they're out of your deck. So your deck never actually changes size.
Your active roster is always 15 cards.
Always 15 cards. And it's just really, really fun. I think it's a really fun game if you don't love baseball. If you do love baseball, it's really, really fun.
Yeah.
Because a lot of cool baseball art in baseball, like, oh, this is that player. Oh, that's Clayton Kershaw. Oh, that's
Lots
Tim
of
Lincecum.
nods to famous figures.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Baseball Highlights has been classic for us. It'll probably never leave our collection. It's really, really good. It's number 8.
Number 7 is a 2-player trick-taking game that we got into after we'd kind of become aware of 2-player trick-taking games, of which there are quite a few at this point. This is Claim.
Claim,
so this is a really fun one where you are going back and forth, and you're playing kind of 2 halves of a game, playing out tricks, and you're using kind of mythological creatures and races and things.
Yeah, it's like dwarves and stuff. Yeah.
So in the base game, I think it's there's like knights and goblins, seers,
dwarves,
or
doppelgangers, and something else.
The other ones. And they all have kind of different ways that they act and stuff. And so for the most part, you're playing tricks where you're going to have to follow suit if you can. The highest card wins. There you go, the undead. And in the first half of the game, there's always going to be one card face up in the middle of the table, and you're going to play just a trick, which is just each playing one card. And whoever wins that trick gets to collect that card and start to build a hand for the second half of the game. Whoever loses that trick just draws a card off the top of the deck. It might be good, it might be bad, you do not know. It's just random. And what's really fun for us is that, like, when you flip over that card might not be good.
It might be trash.
And so I, as the person leading this trick, I'm going to try my hardest to lose this.
This you're better off just drawing off the top of the deck.
Yeah, so you're constantly, like, changing your strategy and stuff. And then the different cards will interact with each other in different ways. Like there's goblins and stuff, and every goblin is beat by any knight. The highest, a level 10 goblin is beat by a level 1 knight. Knights just smash goblins always.
Yep.
The dwarves will collect cards, because in the second half of the game, you're playing with all those newly won cards, and then you're trying to collect those cards and try to have the most of each of the races to be able to be awarded that point. If you get the majority of the points, you win. Dwarves, if you lose a trick, you collect any dwarves that were involved in that trick.
Yep.
And so now you're like, well, I'm trying to lose, or you played a knight, I don't have knights, I'm going to throw a dwarf in here, so I'm going to lose a trick by collect a dwarf.
Yep.
So there's all these different things you
The
can
undead,
do.
you get to collect them during the first half of the game, not the second half of the game. So every race...
So you're always doing different stuff.
Yeah, like every fantasy race works differently.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's Claim. There's also Claim 2, which is a standalone game, which has 5 more races, and you can mix and match all together. There's also like 6 different expansions, which add on top of more fantasy factions.
There's like
a whole like locations and weapons and all this other stuff. We haven't even explored a lot of it. But the reason why Claim sticks around is like my favorite of the 2-player trick-taking games, over something like Fox and the Forest, which I do love, is because there's so much, it's so interesting just with like Claim 1. Yeah. But then you add in any of their factions, and also you're playing a different game because, again, every faction works differently.
And how do they work with
and
there's
there's so many varieties of stuff you can switch in and out and in and out and in and out, and it's just so cool, so variable. And all the boxes are like this big.
Super
we literally
portable.
have Claim 1 and Claim 2 in one box.
Yep.
So it's like you have so much variety, and it's also got Mikhailo Dmitrievsky art, so it's got really great art.
Yeah,
it's
super
just
fun.
cool. It's just absolutely cool.
Yeah, it's super duper cool, and the whole thing is like that first half of the game is just setting up the second half of the game where it actually matters.
Where it actually matters,
because you're trying to win and collect cards so that when you go and I have your new hand of cards, you're really well set up to get a bunch of those dwarves, a bunch of those undead and things like that to ultimately win.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting and different. There's tons of variety, great art. What's not to love? That's Claim, which is number 7.
Number 6 is a great tug-of-war game, and this is Caper Europe. Another tug-of-war game that might have been on the list if Mike has played it, but he hasn't, is Watergate. Watergate, I really like Watergate. Mike hasn't played it yet, but another great tug-of-war game is Caper Europe.
Yeah, Caper Europe is a really fun theme. You're pulling heists. You're building out a crew of criminals.
Yep.
And you are equipping them with gear. And you're doing this to basically try to gain control over these 3 locations.
You're like at the Louvre trying to steal stuff. Yeah,
you're in different cities, so you can be in Paris or London.
Rome, I think.
Rome and Barcelona, I believe.
Yeah.
And you'll always be in one of those, so if you're in Paris and stuff, the Louvre might be a location.
Yep.
And you're going to be playing out crew and then cars. And it's kind of set collection-y stuff where a card you might put down, a crew member is, for every purple color card that gets added, from your gear and stuff will pull the kind of influence over that location one step closer to your side. And at the end of the game, you hope to be the one that has more kind of your influence on each of the 3 locations.
Tug of war,
But Nick's not going to let that stand, so he's going to play cards that are going to kind of counterbalance that. There's cards that allow you to steal these like little these rare artifacts and artworks and stuff, which is a bit set collection on its own.
Like that.
And other cards are worth points, again, based on usually the types of colors of cards you put. And it's a card drafting game. So you're going to alternate between crew rounds where you're going to be drafting out crew members and then gaining money from those crew members. And then in the alternate rounds, you're going to be drafting out gear and then spending that money and stuff. So there's just a lot of fun back and forth. Nick the other day set me up where I was so focused on this one location, he kept doing stuff to mess with that. But meanwhile, he took this other location completely away, and I didn't even notice. And he was deliberately messing with me over here, so I didn't pay attention. Stuff like that. You can just mess with each other in a lot of great ways.
Yeah, it's a great kind of tactical 2-player tug-of-war game. It's just really, really fun. And again, you can be at different locations, or different cities, rather, and those change up the game a little bit each time, too. So it's like nice. There's like 4 different cities in the game. So it's always a little bit different, but it's just a really great game. Also, Keymaster makes this game, and the production of this game is incredible. It's got this really wonderful like felt insert. And the production value is really good. It's just like the production, the product from top to bottom in terms of gameplay, art, and just production value is just like top notch. Caper Europe is super fun.
It's the same company that made like parks and stuff. So like that's where they operate. They live way up there in the high production value. But it's a nice contained game. It's not expensive.
The classic 2-player. Honestly, like half the games in this list
come
in
in
that classic like
box,
2-player.
Where's
the
2-player square?
Where's one?
So like where's dual?
Like this box. This is the classic 2-player box.
For 2-player. Yeah, if you see that box shape, assume it's a 2-player game until you know otherwise, because it almost always is.
Like 85% of the time.
That's a great box shape right there.
That's Caper Europe.
That's Caper Europe.
Another game in that exact same box shape is Targi.
Indeed, it is.
Targi's a great 2-player worker placement game.
Yes, worker placement.
Worker placement with worker.
A tactical worker. It's literally tactical placement of workers.
Yes,
game.
yes. Exactly, because where you place your workers matters for multiple reasons.
Yes.
So basically, this is a game where in the middle of the board, there's a bunch of cards. They're going to be a mix between goods cards and tribe cards.
Yep.
And then around the board of those cards, there are going to be other cards that are mostly going to be action cards. And so when you place one of your Targis, you have 3 of them. You're going to place them on the outside border. So you place it here, and then Mike's going to place one, then I'm going to place one, then Mike plays one, then I place one. And then where you place them matters, on top of one, because you want to do the action they're on.
Correct, yeah.
But then also because then you're going to draw invisible lines essentially across the middle of the board. So if I have a Targi here and a Targi here, I'm going to draw a line and then boom, those lines are going to intersect here. So I'm also going to get to do the action where that intersection is.
Yeah, you put a little tribe marker on those intersection points, essentially.
Indeed. So basically, you're going to get to do 3 things on the outside for the most part, and then usually 2 things in the middle. But the 2 things you do in the middle depends on the intersection of your Targi kind of like invisible lines.
Yes.
So it's this really interesting way to think about worker placement where you're like, I really need this tribe card, which means I need to have my intersection happen there.
Yes.
So how can I do that by placing my stuff on
tricky.
the outside? But then on top of that, there's also a lot of kind of like screw you moments in this because
yes, there's a lot of placement rules about how and where you can place those
you
figures
can't
on
place
the outside
directly
of the board.
across from someone else's
Yeah.
Targi. So I'm like, oh, I know Mike wants this card. I'm going to place it, boom, right here. And now Mike can't place it right across from here. So he's got to try to get there a different way. There's a lot of FU stuff in this game.
Yeah, it's
really good though.
It's a tactical in your face. I mean, a lot of 2-player games are that way where it's head to head, and this very much feels that way. But it's really cool because you're gaining goods and stuff and turning in those goods to complete those tribe cards.
Yep.
So it's kind of like contract fulfillment.
A bit, yeah.
Those are going to go into a tableau that you're building where they might give you endgame scoring opportunities and instant benefit and ongoing power.
Yeah, a lot of different stuff.
A lot of things like that. And they'll also have like an icon like a palm tree or a camel. So there's a little bit of like each row you want to have like a bunch of one symbol or all different symbols.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to consider. And for us, we recently got the Targi expansion called the Expansion, which really kind of
it's really good.
Puts a lot of new blood into the game. It introduces water as sort of this like wild resource, and there's these sand dune cards you can get by putting one of your Targi figures over onto one of those cards, which means you're going to have one less intersection in the middle, but those are really powerful cards. Yes. So it might be like worth it as a compensation.
It opens up the game just a little bit, makes it slightly less brutal, which we're honestly okay with because the game is so rage-inducing sometimes. Because you're like, get out of the way, you know. So I really like the expansion.
The expansion goes next level. I cannot recommend that expansion highly.
Really
enough.
good.
It's so good.
Targi's outstanding. It's a classic for a reason. Been around for a minute. It's just so good. Nothing feels like it. It's just a banger. Absolute banger.
Super cool the way they did those intersections. I want to see more games do stuff like that.
Right?
Let's target number 5.
Let's get number 4. Also in the exact same size box is Patchwork.
I think they all are. Well, coming up, you'll see. The point is, so many of them. Patchwork is a game that's classic from Uwe Rosenberg.
5 of the 10.
There you go. From Uwe Rosenberg.
It's so good.
This was the first like 2-player only game that I was ever aware of. I feel like for a lot of people, Patchwork is the first like 2-player only game. I didn't know those types of things existed.
Right.
And it's a game all about making a patchwork quilt where you are going to be buying with buttons, which I love, different sections of quilt. And they're going to be all different sort of strange shapes.
Polyomino shapes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you're trying to fill in this board as perfectly and concisely as you can with no gaps left over and stuff, which of course there will be. But you only have so many buttons and stuff. And so you're dealing with 2 currencies. You're dealing with buttons, which is what you pay for a tile. And then you have to also spend your time
sewing it into place.
And so some cards have a lower button cost but a higher time cost, and the inverse is also true. And whoever's basically, you're kind of working your way toward the center of this board, and once you're both in the center of the board, the game is over. And whoever's furthest from the center, who's furthest behind on the track, it's that player's turn until they are in front of the other player. So that might afford you the opportunity to take 2 turns in a row. Throughout the game, as you go through that board, you'll cross over these button symbols, which means every button that's on your board, you gain that money, we call it, button income, that gives you more stuff to kind of spend. So there's just interesting choices with the setting up for double turns, This tile is really expensive, but it's going to give me 3 buttons. And if I get 3 more income, that's going to be 9 buttons later. Your buttons are your points, as well as the currency you're spending. So there's just a lot of fun, interesting tactical decisions. But it all comes down to like trying to build out that quilt and make it all the shapes, fit together well. So it doesn't bog you down with like rules per se, but it's a casually, quietly, very thinky kind of puzzle.
It's brutal, because you're managing your money, you're managing your time, you're managing your board, which is a finite shape. Like you only have, it's like 9 by 9.
There's a lot of restrictors.
It's tough and it's really, really hard. And it's just like this, there's been a lot of polygonal tile games, a lot of kind of like patchwork, just inspired things, even by Uwe Rosberg himself. And patchwork is still just the tops. It's just so dang good. Of these kinds of games, it's so classic.
It's hard to beat.
It's just outstanding. Talking about Boop, there's also like multiple different kinds of patchwork. They're just, they're
so
themed
many.
different. There's like a Valentine's Day one and like a Halloween one. And I'm like, that's so
there's
cool.
different ones from different countries featuring like their
It's
textiles
so cool.
and stuff.
Yeah,
it's like I would love to get them all.
The
someday. I don't
whole
know how
set.
you
Yeah,
could,
me
but
too. Yeah, patchwork is just, it's a classic for a reason. It's done so well, and I'm so happy because it's so good.
Yeah.
That's number 4, patchwork. Let's get into number 3. This is the last one in this size box.
This is the last one. All right, this is Beer and Bread.
It's a newer game, but man, it's good.
It's so good. So for us, like our general taste in games are mid to heavyweight Euro games and stuff. And Beer and Bread really gives you the feeling of one of those types of games in a quick, condensed way.
30, 45 minutes max.
First of all, game set on a farm. That's already like 50,000 points in the plus.
Love it.
You are baking bread and brewing beer.
Yeah, you're like families across a river.
Yeah, you're
like
neighboring
families,
towns.
villages, and you're like neighboring towns, and you have a friendly competition every year where you're gonna bake bread and brew beer. I'm hard to say that. And you're basically gonna come together and you're competing. Who can make the best beer? Who can make the best bread?
Yes, and you have to be good at both.
Yes. Can't be all bread, no beer.
Yeah, so what you're doing is in alternating rounds, you're going from kind of fruitful years where there's more goods that are harvested. You have rye
hops,
and
yeast, hops, rye, wheat,
things like that. So to make your various concoctions and stuff. And then you go into kind of more dry years where there's going to be fewer of those resources. And what you're kind of doing in those rounds with the cards you're playing is going to change. So all the cards you're playing are either going to be able to... They're all try-use cards, but they're all going to be either beer or bread cards. Meaning if you use them for the recipe, you'll make a beer or a bread. But you can also use them to kind of tuck into your like harvest row so you can produce more goods for yourselves. You can put them under your board to give yourself upgrades and stuff that give you maybe endgame scoring or bonus things if you do this certain type of action. If you collect water, you get
special
more
powers,
water. All sorts of special powers. And then, of course, you can bake bread and brew beer, which are going to give you your victory points. But you're only going to get victory points equal to the lower of your 2 scores. So you have to be balanced in your approach.
You do.
And so it's just a lot of stuff to think about. And in those alternating rounds, you're going to be either drafting out cards kind of standard, or you're going to be playing cards from a hand, and cards you play in those other rounds you will pick up. If there are harvest cards, you'll pick back up, so you can kind of like save cards for later. There's a lot of like tricky little things you can do.
There's so many in this game
to plan ahead.
That's the thing. There's so many, like, you have to think ahead. You have to like plan ahead, and you have to like, okay, I'm going to put this card over here and harvest it right now because next round I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to bake this bread, or I'm going to use it for its special power, or maybe even harvest it again. Who knows? And so there's all these. It's a tough game because it's a relatively simple game in terms of rules, and it's quick, but there's so many different things to think about. And the fact that every single card is really, really good all 3 ways. And so you have to decide, how do you want to use this card? Do you want to use it for a harvest? Do you want to bake or brew the beer? Or do you want to use it for a special power? Because the special powers are super useful. And it's just this back and forth. It's just so dang good. It's so much fun.
Your storage is limited of what you can hold on to, so there's a lot of things to consider.
Trying to be efficient. It's just really fun.
It's really fun. It packs a lot of gameplay into a small space. The board is not large. Your player area and stuff is not large. It's all really contained.
Yeah, because the main board is half of its mine, half of its mics. You don't have a player board.
Some areas to hold resources, so it's very contained, and it's just honestly, we're of that mind now where I'm like, if you ever give me a game like that where it's not taking up a ton of table, I'm interested more than from before. So it's a flex, man.
That's Beer and Bread. It's really, really good. We can go on and on and on. Let's get into number 2, though. Number 2, we only play like once a year or so, but gosh, it is such an experience. This is going to be War of the Ring.
Cheers, you know?
War of the Ring is Lord of the Rings in a box. It is a humongous game. You know, beer and bread. A lot of these games on here, there's not too many huge two-player games, aside from like war games, and this is a war game ultimately.
Of them, but
but this is Lord of the Rings in a box. One player plays the Shadow Army, the kind of Sauron side, and one people plays the Free People, which is like the Fellowship side.
Yep.
And the Free People are trying to destroy the ring or win a military victory, which they basically won't do because it's very difficult. And then the Shadow Army is trying to corrupt the ring bearers or win a military victory. But it's much easier for them to do so, but they need to conquer a lot more to do so than the Free Peoples. And it's really asymmetric. You're really playing two completely different games.
Yeah.
And you're rolling.
You're the Fellowship, you're sneaking around and stuff.
You're sneaking around, trying to get to Mount Doom, trying to go up Mount Doom, trying to deal with the corruption you're getting, trying to not get found. And then usually as the Shadow player, you're trying to find the ring, but you're just assaulting all of the different, you know, you're going to Gondor and you're going over to Rohan and you're doing all this stuff. It's so much fun and it's super asymmetric and it's just great. Talk about beer and bread. This also has a bunch of these really beautiful big tarot-sized cards.
Yeah, they're nice.
That are all dual use where you can play them for kind of their ability or you can use them during fights. And it's always this tough choice of like, what do I want to do with this card? Do I want to save it for a fight or do I want to use it for this ability right here?
You don't want to leave yourself empty-handed.
Yes.
But man, those top abilities are really great. But
They're
the bottom
so
abilities
good.
might really, especially if you're the Free People, might get you out of a jam.
Yeah.
So it's really tough decision.
And it's just so fun to tell your own story of Lord of the Rings, like your own version where Boromir does go to Minas Tirith. And he's like in there fighting with Legolas, but Gimli and Aragorn are over in the Shire trying to stave off, you know.
And Pippin's the ring bearer now, you know.
Yeah, and Pippin, Sam, and Frodo are the ones who go to Mount Doom. And it's just like, you can just tell these cool stories.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
It's really, really cool. I mean, it's cool to have something that has such an established, well-known story and still gives you a sandbox to play with it.
Yes, right?
And also do the story. Like, it's really quite a feat. I know there's other games that have done this well that we haven't had a chance to play, but War of the Ring for us is, it's never getting played that often because it is a big undertaking.
Yes.
But it's never, ever going anywhere. Nick has painted up the armies and stuff. It's a great game. It's truly
really,
great,
really
epic. We're not war game folks, but like that is a war game for us right there.
Okay.
Put it in Middle Earth, we'll be all right. So thematics matter. War of the Rings number 2, but we do have one that we like a little bit better.
Just a little bit more. Let's get into it. All right, and number 1 is Fields of Arle. Just farming stuff.
We're Uwe Rosenberg farm people. Y'all know this by now.
Yeah, this is cool. This is a big box, kind of like your Caverna size, like big box game, but it's for 1 to 2 players only.
Amazing.
And the 1-player game is really just a 2-player game. It's very similar. Yeah. But this is a 2-player only game, and it's so we're immediately like, a big box Uwe that's only 2 players? Are you kidding me? I'm here for it, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I remember like hearing that Fields of Arle was this Uwe game that existed, but we had never heard about it. Then I heard it was like 2-player. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And then we wanted to get it, you know, because
you don't get very many 2-player like big Euro games.
No, that's
pretty rare actually.
It's a different vibe, and it gives you all of those kind of. If you're into Uwe Rosenberg stuff, you'll be into Fields of Arle. It feels reminiscent of those other games while also being its own thing. You're cutting out peat bogs and stuff. You are advancing your tools, I'll say. And one thing that's really great is this game centers around bouncing back and forth between summer and winter seasons. The warm weather seasons and the cold weather. Yeah. And in each half of the year, you have to kind of prepare a little bit for the other half. So in summer and stuff, you want to kind of make sure you have food and things aplenty, because going into winter, you're going to spend a bunch of food to start because it's like more lean and you need to have stuff stored up. Yeah. And then in winter, you have certain opportunities to do certain actions only exist on one half or the other half of the board. Yep. You're probably not doing a ton of building and stuff in winter because it's like cold out. So you're kind of balancing the back and forthness of how do I prepare in winter for summer to make sure I'm getting the best out of each season in turn.
Yeah, there's a lot of actions that are, again, when you're in summer, you can only do actions on the summer side. And then when you're winter, you only do that. And so it's really interesting to be like, okay, I can't do this now. I really need to do this now, but I can't do it until we get to winter. So I'm going to do these things, and then when we get to winter, I need to prioritize that because I can't do this in summer. And so you're just kind of bouncing back and forth, and it's just really good. Again, there's a lot more like kind of Uwe stuff that if you play a lot of Uwe games, they'll be like, again, it feels very different from any other Uwe game, but there's still just like, oh, this just feels very Uwe-like.
You got to cover your board and stuff. You don't want negatives there. You got to.
And there's a bunch of buildings you can get which do different stuff, and it's just again it looks like an Uwe game, but it's so 100%. Much fun. And that back and forth between the two seasons is great. And just trying to be as efficient as possible, trying to ship out these goods, trying to do all this stuff is really, really fun.
Yeah.
And balancing that, the two halves of the board is just great. And it's really, really outstanding. I like Fields of Arle a lot.
There's just a lot of good stuff going on. It feels like one of those ones that like you could play again and again and actually get really good at. I don't think either of us have achieved
We're not good at this game at all.
But there seems to be a lot to explore. There's a really good expansion, which actually does take it to 3-player then.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm interested in that part, but it's like the tea and trade expansion. I'm curious about what that adds. It's just really cool and a flex to see like we're going to give you that big kind of Euro game worker placement type thing, but keep it down to 2-player and then also work that kind of bouncing back and forth between the times of the year. It just feels really neat. There's a lot of fun stuff to explore in that one. So, of course, it had to be our number 1.
It's just so good.
And that's our list, everybody.
Yeah.
So that's 10 games right there. Again, we have 10 more on our Patreon that we're going to talk about. You're going to start to see our patrons scrolling right here. One thing to note, because I know someone's going to drop a comment about it, we haven't played Star Wars Rebellion yet. We want to. We really wanted to be able to play it before doing this list because I'm sure it will be on this list.
Don't know when it's going to happen.
We just haven't had a chance to yet. So if anyone out here in comments drops, what about Star Wars Rebellion, then I know you didn't watch the video. You just scan through to see the numbers. Joke's on you. You're looking foolish out here.
But yeah, that is our top 10 list. Again, big shout out to our patrons below. Again, check out the list over there. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. We're the Buzz Murph. Subscribing is free. We'd really appreciate it.
It really helps us a ton.
Indeed. And that's our 2-player list. Let us know your favorite 2-player games down in the comments below.
Get them in the list.
And we'll see you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for watching that top 10. Again, there's another supplemental top 10 over on our Patreon, so make sure to check that out. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Make sure to let us know your favorite 2-player only games down in the comments below, and we'll see you later. Bye, everybody.